Okay, I will get started. I guess I'll make this look nice and then I'll fiddle about with all of the other things at the end of it. So yes, we're going to be talking about using the Data Management Planning Assistant tool today. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into that. I'm sure many of you were at the previous session where you learned all there was to know really about research data management. We're going to go over probably a little bit of the same ground today, but we're really going to dive into this fantastic online tool that can really help you with writing out these data management plans. I'm going to make you all a bit smaller. There. Okay. So, pardon me. So what are the goals of the workshop today? So we're going to talk about what are data management plans. I probably learned a bit about that earlier, but we'll really get into there. Why do I need a data management plan? Beyond the fact that the tri-councils will make you have one, there are a lot of really, really good reasons to have a data management plan. How do I complete a data management plan? And this is a question that I get a lot. Like I don't even know where to start with this. And where can I find other resources? We are going to point you to so many resources. I am in awe of librarians and all they do and all they have put together to really help researchers with filling out these data management plans. They're really going to make all of us do better research and better science. Right. So what is a DMP? So it's a data management plan. The sort of, I guess, the formal definition, as it were, it's a formal statement describing how research data will be managed and documented throughout a research project and the terms regarding the subsequent deposit of the data with a data repository for long-term management and preservation. This is from the International Science Council Committee on Data. It's basically, what are you doing with your research data? How are you going to keep it safe? How are you going to preserve it? How are you going to share it? What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it while you're working in it, the active research data? How are you going to do sort of a midterm when you're sharing and when you're still analyzing, when you're still publishing? What are you going to do with that data long-term? How much of it do you need to save, et cetera? So we'll talk about a lot of this, but a lot of it goes down to documenting and thinking through what you're going to be doing. And it really is an integral part of the whole research data management process. If you weren't able to come to the earlier session, we will be posting those videos. We really encourage you to watch that. And I will point you to a lot of other educational resources throughout the course of this. Great. And you're up, Meghan.
Thank you. So why do I need a data management plan? So there are many reasons why one would need a DMP, but I'm going to review 4 main reasons that the Portage Network, who came up with the DMP Assistant tool, put forth in a document called A Brief Guide to Data Management Plans. And so these 4 reasons are efficiency, to identify both strategies and potential challenges in advance, develop sound data practices for your research team, and prepare data for effective use during your project. And number 2, research quality, so ensure reliability and accuracy of data through careful documentation of your data collection and handling and stewardship practices. 3, reusability and impact, so improve discoverability, accessibility, and reusability of your data by planning for sharing into a repository and to increase the potential impact of your research. And lastly, compliance. So to satisfy DMP requirements that may be set forth by specific granting agencies, such as tri-agencies, or even your own institution. So many have internal grant programs for open access, and this is contingent upon producing a data management plan. So if you can go to the next slide, Meghan. So the purpose of a data management plan is really to help guide you through all the different stages of the research data lifecycle so that you can think of how to manage your data from beginning to end. Rather than being proscriptive, the DMP, and specifically the DMP Assistant tool that we will be walking through today, will just allow you to start a conversation with yourself about the what, where, and why, and hows of your own research data. As most of us know, research is not always a linear process, and the same can be said for data management plans. So the research life cycle here is seen as beginning with, there's no real start, to it, but it's the plan, create, process the data, analyze it, disseminate it, preserve, and reuse. And this sometimes can be repeated many times, and sometimes some are not always sometimes you don't always go in this fashion, but this is kind of what it looks like at a glance. And as I mentioned, it's the same for data management plans, but it is really important to start a data management plan at the start of your research. But it's something that you will have to revisit often, just as you do in your own research, and make changes as they come about. Next slide. Thank you. So some of the benefits of having a data management plan. DMPs will help you to become better researchers overall by keeping your research process streamlined and saving you time. Creating a data management plan will help you to identify services, resources, workflows, and tools that will help you do better research. And they will make it easier for others to find your work, making it easier to share, access, and reproduce your work, and save you from using just USBs that can easily get lost in your purse or wherever you like to keep them. So creating a DMP gets you thinking about your data and where it's stored. The session earlier today, for those of you who were able to attend, on research data management for humanists and social scientists, tasked all the learners with writing a data inventory of their research. And I think this is a really important and useful exercise that pushes you to identify all sources and locations of your data. It also highlights the importance of the data storage rule, which is the 3-2-1 rule that we'll be talking about later. And we go more in depth into this in a later slide. Next slide, thank you. So how do I write a DMP? Probably the most powerful tool in your arsenal for creating a data management plan is the DMP Assistant. And I will talk a little bit about it before the other Meghan demonstrates a walkthrough together. So I'm just going to link in the chat here a link to the data management plan. So we had asked some, if you were able to create an account beforehand so that you can follow along, but by any means, if you prefer to just watch and take notes, that's perfectly fine. And so I just saw a message in the chat said, when and where will the recordings of the session be found? So we will be contacting everyone via Eventbrite with the links. So it will probably take a few weeks to process, but these recordings will live on the Alliance's Vimeo account. So we will be in contact with those when they come about. So officially, the DMP Assistant is a national online bilingual data management planning tool developed by the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, which I'll just refer to as the Alliance, in collaboration with host institution University of Alberta, that assists researchers in preparing data management plans. This tool is freely available to all researchers and develops a DMP through a series of key data management questions, as supported by best practice, guidance, and examples. So DMPs are one of the foundations of good research data management. It's an international best practice and increasingly required by institutions and funders, including the Canadian tri-agencies, as outlined in their research data management policy that came out somewhat recently. So the DMP Assistant is just that, a tool for helping you develop DMPs. So it includes step-by-step questions about data management, provides guidance and examples. They're built in discipline-specific templates, which I think is really important, which is why we've created this, community today, bringing together humanists and social scientists, because their needs, for data management are different from those who work in, the STEM fields that traditionally work with numerical data and that sort of thing. So there are discipline-specific templates and examples out there that you can look at. And then discipline-specific exemplars provided by the Alliance. And so then we'll go next to the elements of a DMP. So there's 7 sections of the DMP Assistant tool that all include very straightforward questions that help you think through 7 areas. So this would be data collection, documentation and metadata, storage, backup and access, 4, sharing and reuse, 5, ethics and legal compliance, 6, responsibilities and resources, and 7 on preservation. So the other Megan will now give a brief walkthrough of the DMP Assistant tool, and then we will both explore these questions more in depth and say, look at exactly what they're asking for and give you some examples of what they're looking for. So Megan, I'll pass it over to you now. You're muted, Megan.
Of course I am. Apologies. I've put the link to the Data Management Plan Assistant in the chat. Everyone can visit along if you'd like. And so you can see at the bottom, and can everyone see my cursor? Can you, Megan? Yeah. Cursor's good. Okay. It sort of goes over the institutions that are helping with this. The DMP Assistant is part of the Digital Research Alliance of Canada now. So what I want to do in this sort of in-depth walkthrough is not only walk you through how to use the tool, but also to help you find all the amazing resources that are really sort of embedded within this tool. So when you come to the first page, welcome to the DMP Assistant. It's very happy to see you. And before we get started with signing into account and writing anything, I want to go through and explore some things to help you really start thinking about everything to do with research data management and using this tool. So down at the bottom here in the screen are a series of sort of get started resources. So brief guide to data management plans, creating effective data management plans, more data management plans, how to manage your data, which is saying a data management plan a slightly different way. But these are all excellent resources. So I'll go and click on one, and they vary. So very brief guides. These are only a few, couple of pages. All hosted all over the place, created by the incredible research data management community, which is within the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. So there are a number of resources. If we go down, create an effective data management plan. Again, these brief guides are very extremely brief guides that just to get you started of the types of questions you should be asking yourself at the beginning of the process. And I would recommend coming to see these. The training videos especially are, exactly like what we're doing here. They are videos that really walk you through the basics of research data management and using this tool. So managing DMPs with a DMP Assistant. Again, these are short little bite-sized, well, not her, but short little bite-sized videos that give you in-depth information on using the DMP. There are some excellent webinars as well. So in order if you'd like to see even more resources, come over here. This is the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. That's the umbrella that Meghan and I operate under. Their research data management information here. So for those of you who were at the first session today, the Further Sensitive Data Project, there's information about Further, about the DMP Assistant, learning and training, networks of experts as well. If you want to talk to more people who are very can help with the research data management, and in addition to the information on the DMP Assistant, the learning and training section here has additional, you can really drill down into a number of resources, more training resources here, which the further you get, the more places you click on, the more information. So essentially what we're getting at with this is there is no end to good information available for learning more about writing data management plans, data management in general. And there are also a huge network of experts in Canada that you can reach out to. So moving back to the DMP Assistant here, there are a couple other bits that I'll show before we'll dive into the tool. So let's say you've learned everything there is to know about research data management, but you're still a bit unclear about what a plan is supposed to look like. So this is where having examples are really, really helpful. I am an example person for sure. I always try to find really helpful examples of things. I find them very, very, very useful for myself. So if you go up to the very top here, you'll see this button, Public DMPs. So these are DMPs that people have completed and added to the site. These aren't necessarily vetted or complete or have everything that a particular funding body would need, but they're a good way of not only looking to see, what does a data management plan look like when you download one of these, but also finding people who are doing similar research to you. And this is extremely helpful. Let's see, there we go, light spectrum and intensity on female turkey breeder performance. That's an extremely exciting topic. And if any of you are also looking at light intensity of female turkey breeding performance, this data management plan might be very useful for you and be able to see, okay, we're both dealing with the same sort of research process. We're both looking at the same types of data. We're both working with the same types of data. How is this group thinking about it? And that really just helps you kind of have an idea of what similar researchers might be doing in this space. Now I'm going to go back to home. And then for creating an account, I hope people have created an account prior to coming. If you haven't, please rapidly do so in the background. And it'll just allow you to walk through the tool together with us. A lot of what Megan and I are going to be talking about at the end of the talk when we go through the guidance on the particular questions is really taken straight from this website. The guidance notes, and I'll show you in a second, are really excellent and will help you to answer the questions in a way that's relevant for your research. So to create an account, just click create account and fill in all the relevant information. It's the straightforward sort of thing. Here's one I created earlier. Let's see, that's me. And when you have an account, you come up and you have a number of buttons up here that you can look at. So your dashboard, this is where it shows you all of the plans that you have created so far. We'll go into that in a moment, but first let's explore a bit of what we have up here. Your dashboard is where your plans are for your project that you've created. Create a new plan. You can either do so here or down at the bottom of the button. Reference materials. These are, first of all, the public DMPs that we spoke about earlier. And the templates, which I'll go into in a second because they're really, really important. Help and about the same usual things. So for references, we looked at a bit of the public DMPs, but now I want to go down and look at DMP templates. So these are templates that were either created by something like the Alliance or the Portage Network, which is now the RDM part of the Alliance, and they're created by trusted organizations with a huge discipline scope to really help researchers get started. Again, so there are for our crowd here specifically, we have Portage template for arts-based research, mixed methods, surveys, and qualitative. If we go down here to the bottom, there's some more research for history and the humanities. So there's some really, really useful ones. What you can do as well to have a look at some of these what we've done now is we've sort of just used this template. I'll go back because I clicked that very quickly. You can create a new plan based on this template by clicking on one of the two buttons here. Either copy the link so you can send it, or just create a new plan based on this template. If there are any sample plans available using this template, you can look at those there as well. But these are very helpful for our purposes today. I will go back here and I have copied a couple so we can have a look. So this is one that I had earlier, and it goes through, we'll go through all this in depth. And this is the copy that I made of that history template. Now for today, I'm going to use just the plain arts-based research template, which is a good sort of catch-all for anybody doing humanities. There are things that may or may not be applicable to everybody's research, and that's pretty much true throughout the entire DMP. So let's say you want to create a new plan. You can either use one of the templates as I demonstrated earlier, or you can create a new plan. So if we go down here for actions, there you can edit, share with colleagues, download, copy, delete. Fairly straightforward, the types of things you can do with your plans. But let's get in and have a look at what one of these looks like. So we'll click on one of Megan's plans. So when you click on, when you create a new plan, just a couple of these things. So you delete a new plan. The first thing you get to are the project details. And this is just where you can start to fill in the really high level information about your project. What's your project title? Megan's plan, a small abstract. You can even click this if this is just a mock project. It's not something that you are going to ever want to share or work with anything like that. Project abstract, the dates of your project, an identifier. ID is determined if you have a funder ID, something like that, you could put there. The funder, status, grant number, URL. Quite a lot of these you don't have to put them in, but they make your plan more complete. And likely, depending on what the requirements are for your institution, they may want all of this in so that they can ensure that it goes with the right grant. So let's go to the next section, contributors. So the project's principal investigators and those responsible for data management. Here you can start adding in the people who are, responsible for data management within your project. If it's just you, it's a small project, but you can also assign roles to different people who are part of this project. If you have a data manager, if there's another principal investigator, if you have a project manager or administrator, one, you're very, very lucky, and two, you can add these people to your plan. So just normal information, ORCID ID if they have one, so that that can help connect them to their ORCID information. Up here, you can view all the contributors to your project. This is just a mock one. I don't have one right now. Plan overview. So this is excellent information and absolutely what you should start with first. It has some information about the template that you're going to be using, some general instructions for how to complete it. And down here, these are the sections of a DMP that Megan talked about earlier. And each of these bullet points is actually a question that you will be asked about your data and about your data management plan that you'll be filling out. But one thing to start with, everybody's research is different. Every project is different. Every project has a different scale and scope. It's very possible that not all of these questions will be applicable to your data, to your research. And if they're not, that's okay. That's okay. It's worth noting, documenting everything. Documentation is huge. As someone who did a PhD in the dark days before research data management was really a thing that was taught to grad students, I am fully on board with all things documentation, because I know that my own research from those days is a complete, total shambolic mess. And so I certainly think that you can never document too much about what you're going to be doing. I'm just going to plug this computer in very quickly so that you don't lose me midway through. So this is just sort of some instructions, going over, read everything here. And now we'll go to write your plan. Dun, dun, dun. No, don't be too scared. It's a very neat interface. It doesn't hit you with everything at once. Everything is very neatly organized in these sort of expandable menus. So we'll go through what does it look like here. So we'll start out with data collection, and we'll talk a little bit more about all these individual questions, not too much as we're finishing the last bit. But what you see when you come to the data collection section, to the different sections in your DMP, is first of all, you get a question. What types of data will you use or create or collect? What methods will you use? It's a pretty big question. It's a pretty broad question. A lot of the questions in the DMP, you might, by the time you get to the end of it, say, I think it asked me the same question about 4 different times. And that's okay as well, because it gets you just to think about things in a slightly different way. There are all sorts of ways of formatting as well, if you need to have your DMP formatted in a certain way. And what is so brilliant about the interface here is that you have multiple places to get information on how you might answer this question within the context of your own research. So down here you have examples. What do they mean by data? What is data? Examples here of the types of data that we might be talking about: drawings, songs, films, tools, absolutely everything. It's a pretty big list here. And then you also have guidance notes at the same time here that help you think about what this question is really asking you, and how you might, again, start thinking about this question in terms of your own research data. So examples of the types of data, and then here in the guidance notes, you have some information on really helping you think through this question. Now, earlier, we entered in contributors, and you were able to define roles and that kind of thing, and share your data management plans. That was one of the actions that we looked at the beginning. So this is also a great place where your collaborators, people you have shared this data management plan with, the other people who are involved in your project, can add comments. So this can really be an iterative process with the other people on your team. So going down, there are a number of different questions in each section. Do you plan on using data sets published by others? Well, where will you collect them from? Again, further on, when Megan and I discuss some of these questions in more detail, we're really just drawing on these guidance notes, because they're excellent, and they have where to get more information. Some of the emails might be a little out of date, but that's okay. And it just goes down in the series of questions. Again, guidance notes for everything. You save at the end. There's space for comments for your contributors and for other collaborators, so that you can work together. And some more fantastic examples here. And you probably learned loads of this in the previous section as well. So we'll close that up. You've saved everything, and just have a look at one of the other sections here. Again, how much storage space will you need for your data? Estimate it. how many, and this is something I work in high performance computing. And so estimating how much storage space is a conversation we have quite a lot with researchers. Where will you store and back up your files? Yes, this is again the 3-2-1 backup rule that Meghan will talk about. Some further links here to other UK-based resources that are very helpful, more examples as well. Going down again, more questions, saving everything, all the way down, preservation, sharing and reuse, responsibilities and resources, and ethics and compliance. And again, I encourage everyone to really read through these guidance notes because they have excellent information in. Now, depending on the template you're using, some of these questions might be a little different. They might have some, might be worded a little bit differently, might be asking for some different information depending on what the template was set up for. And it might have different ways of answering these questions. So that's where the templates and the public DMPs are really helpful, because if you're faced with a question that you think might be applicable to your research, but you're not sure how somebody doing what you do might be able to answer that question, then you can go to those templates and say, okay, this person who is looking at the, digital history of 18th century novels or something. Okay, this is the way they discussed this methodology, or this way of collecting data, or this is how they're going to be addressing long-term preservation with the type of data they're working with. And that's very, very helpful. So writing the plan, which I know I skimmed over a little bit, but we'll discuss the questions in a little bit more detail later on. I don't think we have to read too much. Most of what we'll be saying is really the guidance notes that you can read as well. Share. Okay, so sharing your data management plan. There are a few different ways that you can share. Invite your collaborators, and these are the people that will help you. I'm going to mute for just one moment. Sorry, that was a dog issue. I apologize. And so you can set the either private, where only you can see it. This is if you're working on it, still working on it, you don't want anyone to see it. Share it with your organization, perhaps you want to share it with research services at your institution, or public. If you have created your DMP and you want to share it with other researchers and want to make it a useful apologies for the dog, and you want to make it a useful resource for others, you can share it publicly. Managing your collaborators. Collaborators can have different levels of access and different permissions, either just to look at it or edit it if you have someone on your team who is in charge of coming up with the data management plan, for instance. And then you can add these in and submit them. And then finally, downloading your form. There's some options, different options for formatting as well. Absolutely everything over. Unanswered questions, perhaps you want those if you need to discuss them with one of the research services or support at your institution. You can do that, downloading in different formats, depending on what the requirement is for your particular funder. And that is a fairly quick go through of the DMP Assistant. And I'll pause for a moment to ask if there are any questions, if anybody has anything they want to put in the chat or anything they would like to ask now.
What would you say are the major benefits of using this system?
I would say the major benefits are that the DMP Assistant once gives you a really nice structured way of creating a data management plan. And one that is, I think, increasingly understood by a lot of institutions. Oh, here's one created through. But also it's the way in which it really guides your thinking about your research data and what you're doing. Sometimes it's hard to come up with, well, I'm not quite sure what is it. And the previous presentation about research data management for humanists, again, it's really how to think about your data, how to think about what you're doing. And I think the questions and the guidance notes help you think through that in not only a structured way, but also think through it in all the different parts of the research data lifecycle. So if we go back over to Write Plan, you've got data collection. So there are a few of these different sections that are things you would think about at the beginning of a project, and things you think of in the middle of a project. When you're in the middle of it, you're elbow deep in data, and it's messy and it's everywhere. And the things you think of at the end when you have nice, neat data and publications and things like that. And the way you're going to be thinking about your data through the entire research data management research life cycle, you might be needing to think about different things. Okay, I'm at the beginning of the project, so I need to start thinking about, the responsibilities of people on my team. Who's responsible for research data management during and after the project? Okay, that's something I need to be thinking about. I mean, all of this needs to be thought about at the beginning, but a lot of the activities involved may take place at the beginning of your project. So I think the questions really, really guide you to thinking about the entire research data lifecycle, rather than just, okay, research data management, that's at the end where I have all my stuff and I have to ask a librarian where to deposit it or something. So that would be my thought. Megan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say the other piece of it is that the DMP Assistant tool was created by people who are essentially, experts in research data. And so these are people who very much understand that the work that we're all doing, and how important it is to, to preserve data and that sort of thing. And the DMP Assistant tool is very much like a grassroots effort of a network of experts that have come together, that have, shared and pooled their expertise on this. And the other aspect of that, having that network of experts, is that it's not a one and done. They didn't create it and then kind of, walk away from it. There is, that group still exists, as well as the working groups that are dedicated to different parts of the DMP Assistant tool, including like the institutional guides and the tutorial videos and slides and the exemplar DMPs and that sort of thing. There's working groups that are always working towards and trying to improve that tool. And I think that's really important, because if it was left to somebody like, me to kind of put the pieces together, as well as try to keep on top of what is required, that's a full-time job in and of itself. And there's already a lot of expected of researchers to learn and do themselves, and they're being pulled in many ways. And especially when you're the reality of a lot of humanists and social scientists is they don't have the massive research teams that those within maybe the STEM fields do, and so they might have an assistant or something like that to help take on a bit of the mental load of like learning a lot of this and that sort of thing. And so the fact that there's other people taking care of this and developing this, I think, is very comforting. And that, that you don't have to go out there and necessarily do it yourself and figure out all the pieces of the puzzle. They've kind of put it together for you, and you just have to fill in the blanks, which I think is really great. So Diane, you asked, is it considered okay for these plans to change and evolve over the course of the project, or that be frowned upon? No, like especially within humanities and that sort of thing, I look at DMPs as a living document. It is something that you continually reassess with your, just as you do your research, and the DMP that you provide to the funding agencies is at the end of it. And so I think that is perfectly okay. And it also shows how engaged you are with your research, that you are continually assessing it, and that, you didn't do a one and done, at the start. You need to be doing it at all points in the research life cycle. It's most important, at the start, but it's something that you need to look at, because your needs sometimes can change, and technology changes too, depending on how long you're working on, things and that sort of thing. And we talk a little bit about that too, thinking towards the future of like, should I store all my, research on a VHS file that is no longer compatible with any systems that we have today, and those types of things. So that's really important to think about. So hopefully that answered your questions. Did you have any more to build upon Diane's question, or Megan, or should we get into the questions of the DMP assistant?
No, I think that's, I think that's, yeah, no, I think that's great. Do we want to go back to the slides for the questions in the DMP, or do we just want to go through them on the tool? That might make.
Yeah, maybe if you don't mind, if you want to pull it up, the first part, the data collection.
Yeah, so.
Oh yeah, sorry, you go. Or were you?
Sorry, does someone else have a question? Please dive in, or at any point, if you want clarification or something, then please just let us know. I'll check the checkbook. There's a question in that I may have been from our French colleagues in the other room. Can the Alliance, people within the Alliance, help you and researchers create a DMP? And the answer there is yes, 100%. There are a huge number of research data management experts within the Alliance, and they're in all kinds of places. So I'll just go really quickly back to research data management. Network of experts. Yes. So this is some of the network of experts that Meghan was mentioning. Data management. One. There it is. Yes. So this is what the network of experts is looking at. Here are a whole bunch of names. It's a lot of people. And I know a lot of them, and they're all brilliant. And it really goes into those working groups, and gives you a number of people that you can contact. There are people working within the Federation who aren't necessarily associated with RDM, like say Meghan and myself, who also are happy to work and connect you with anybody that can help with RDM. And I would also explore the training video and the training resources, because again, that will point you towards people and resources that can help. Okay, so we'll go through some of these questions. What do we have? About a half an hour left. We won't bore you too much by diving in too deeply.
And you did cover some of the kind of questions like throughout it too, so won't spend a whole lot. But so the first question: what types of data will you collect, create, link to, acquire, and record? So here it's important to remember not only to discuss what you will collect, but also how you will collect it. So thinking of examples of data, specifically within the humanities and social sciences. So we're looking at images, audio, video, text, tabular data, modeling data, spatial data, instrumentation data, and so on. So you want to think through absolutely everything that you may collect during the project. The second question is, Do you plan to use data sets? That's a different question than I have on my end. I'm wondering if maybe some of these are out of, pardon?
Or there may have been an update, or they may be out of date from when.
Yeah,
I
let me
wrote
have a
this.
quick
Okay.
look in my.
This
Yeah,
is where it's a good thing there's the guidance notes.
yeah, so it's so the one that I have is what file formats, is that there?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, what file formats will your data be collected in? And will these formats allow for data reuse, sharing, and long-term access? This is a really important question. So proprietary file formats requiring specialized software or hardware to use are not recommended, but that sometimes they may be necessary for certain data collection or analysis methods. For example, some proprietary software is just simply the industry standard, such as ArcGIS for those who work with geospatial data. So using open file formats or industry standard formats, like those widely used by a given community, is preferred whenever possible. And you should also try to keep your text files as plain text files where possible, in other words, so future-proofing your data so that it can still be read or recovered in the future. And a lot of times it's the most simple bare bones type of file format that we're looking at, so something like a text file, rather than, Microsoft Word, or you look back at Word Perfect that used to be big and no longer is, and those types of file formats. So something like a plain text file .txt is really important. So the next one I have is, what conventions and procedures will you use to structure, name, and version control your files to help you and others?
That's one that is not on this template, but is definitely something to consider. I might go back and see if those are on our other template. I think they're on our plain template.
Data collection.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
So this is more of the sort of the standard, and this is a good example of, apologies, I clicked the wrong button at the beginning. This is another good example of where the templates may be asking different questions depending on the type of research you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So number 3, so what conventions and procedures will you use to structure, name, and version control your files? So it's important to keep track of different copies and versions of files. So files, and as well as files held in different formats or locations, and information cross-reference between files. This whole process is called version control. So logical file structures, informative naming conventions, and clear indications of file versions all contribute to better use of your data during and after your research project. So these practices will help ensure that you and your research team are using the appropriate version of your data and minimize confusion regarding copies. So using something like GitHub or a collaborative writing tool like Google Docs, where you were able to, are some good methods for version control, because they keep track of any changes as they come about. And yesterday I was giving a presentation on OpenRefine, which is a data cleaning tool. And it really highlights the importance of version control in this sense, because it keeps very detailed track, and you can download a document simply of the changes that you've made, because a lot of times you will have to justify, why you've done the things that you've done in your research. So using a tool that does it and keeps track of it for you is very important. Other suggestions are deciding at the start of a project how you will label different versions of documents and files, and having everyone in your team stick to the system. So one very common way of doing this is creating a README file, and this lays out the file naming conventions and process for versioning control that you will implement it for your project. So a lot of times when you have a very complex folder structure, the README file is at the very top of that folder, and it is something that is intended for new people that are coming into a project, or people that might not access it as much, that they can look in it and see, okay, what is stored where, how should I be naming this, and so on. And again, this is, and I hate to always be calling out the librarians, but this is a very, useful skill set that a lot of them have and can assist with things like naming conventions and that. And this actually goes into the documentation and metadata piece, which is the next section. So if you scroll down a little bit.
Let me
Oh, sorry.
Oh, bye, Rebecca. Thank you. Sorry, I was just checking the chat.
Oh, sure. So the metadata and documentation section should probably be one of the first ones in the template in many ways, because thinking through these questions are really fundamental to ensuring that the rest of the planning is useful now and future-proof. So as the template says, data is rarely self-explanatory. No one knows what you are doing as well as you do. And what you are doing in your project may look downright esoteric to an outside observer. So information about how to interpret research data and the context in which they were collected is key. So this is data about data, or metadata, ensures data can be understood, analyzed, shared, and preserved. Many disciplines have metadata standards that ensure data can be interpreted and compared across projects and fields. The social sciences, for example, use the internationally accepted Data Documentation Initiative, so DDI standard. There are also many others that you can explore. But lastly, when there are restrictions on the use of the data, the reasons for these restrictions must be explained in the metadata. Skip to the next one. How will you make sure the documentation? So yeah, if someone were to use your data in the future, what would they need in order to understand the data? So good documentation includes information about the study, data level descriptions, basically anything necessary to make that data usable by other researchers. Any other elements that you should document include research methodology, variable definitions, vocabularies, classification systems, units of measurement, assumptions made, format and file types of data, software versions, a description of the data capture and collection methods, an explanation of data coding and analysis, and so on. So all of this is really important to capture. How will you make sure that it is captured consistently? Oh, is this question a little bit okay, I'll skip forward to the metadata standard. Okay. Yeah, as mentioned, there are many general and domain specific metadata standards, and again, would suggest speaking to librarians about what is most appropriate for your particular workflow. And data set documentation should be provided in one of the standard machine readable, openly accessible formats to enable the effective exchange of information. So we're talking about XML or RDF or JSON. They can be used in a variety of programs, applications, software, that sort of thing. So those are generally the most acceptable. And storage and backup. Quickly go over that one. So the 3-2-1 rule: have at least 3 copies of your data, store the copy on 2 different types of media, and keep 1 backup copy offsite. So it's the 3-2-1 rule, and it's something that I always keep in the back of my mind. So storing data on flash drives, laptops, computers, hard drives, and so on is okay in and of itself, but it's not recommended is one of your only ways of saving. So you would need regular backup because they are subject to failure, hardware failure, viruses, theft, loss, so on. So multiple copies of data stored in the same location. So having multiple versions of your literature review all saved on your desktop doesn't really do much either. So you need to have the multiple copies in multiple different places, not all in one place. Yeah, so I'm going through a lot of this, and a lot of this is a lot of it is not necessarily repetitive, but it asks similar questions in different ways. And so I don't want to spend too much on this, but the last piece around data storage, which I think is really, really important, is when you're working with sensitive data. So we had a presentation this morning on sensitive data, and you know, the encryption tool that the Alliance has been developing, which is really important, because data encryption can look like many different things. It can be limiting access, physical or, you know, virtual access to something, through password protection, encrypting data files, and so on. And we also don't recommend that you use something like Dropbox to share. There are other ways out there that you can share data. You can also look to the Alliance for the data storage and protection. For example, they use Globus, which is a more secure alternative to Dropbox. So I'll pass it along to you then, Megan, to talk about preservation.
Okay. And again, we'll kind of go through the last bits fairly quickly, because I think at this point, everyone kind of understands a bit more about the tool. And so rather than you know, doing deep dives into the questions, it's going to be really pointing you towards the information. So for preservation, yeah, where will you deposit your data for the long preservation? This is at the end of your project, when you're at that end. And a lot of that depends on what your obligations are. Does your funder have a particular amount of time you need to keep the data? Are you working with an Indigenous community that has, you're working under OCAP principles? What are the obligations you have regarding that data? Is the data extremely valuable and rare and enduring, I believe is the term that's used. As an archaeologist, I could say that in the course of collecting our data, we tend to destroy it at the same time. It's one of the downsides of archaeology is we wreck it as soon as we've got it. And so that data collection can never be replicated under the same circumstances. And so you might want to preserve more of that. One thing it says up here, it may be desirable to preserve all versions of your data. So that's your raw data, the process, the analyze, the final. Do you need to keep all of this? You should always, and this is just one little a tip here, you should always keep one copy of your raw data of everything, because if you do all your analysis on that one copy of your raw data and something goes completely pear-shaped, then that's it. On the other hand, if you have 800 digital images of the same, let's say, small piece of broken Bronze Age pottery, do you need to keep all 800? Do they add anything to your project by keeping all 800 images? Maybe you can dial it back a little bit. Do you need to keep the transcripts or just of audio interviews, or the entire interview? So thinking through what you need to keep, and how long you need to keep it, and where you're going to keep it. And this is one point where really thinking, working with RDM librarians at your institution and people who work with institutional repositories are really helpful, because they can help you one, understand what some data retention policies might be for funders, and understanding the value of a data set, and knowing where the different data repository options might be for you. Indicate how you will ensure your data is preservation ready. And Megan talked about this above as well. You want to use non-proprietary file formats where you can, such as the text files and CSV files. Don't save everything as WordPerfect files. I have a family member dear to my heart who still uses WordPerfect. And it's like, It's not a great idea. But we don't have that conversation anymore. If you change a file format for some reason, you want to document what you're doing. And that really gets to the I think the heart of data management planning and the way that questions are asked in this tool is that it really wants to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and making sure that everyone involved in your research knows as well. If you make a change, as the question about do data management plans change throughout the course of your research project, of course they might change, because you might make a decision midway through, like, actually, we have taken 800 photographs of this small Bronze Age potsherd. Perhaps we don't need to keep absolutely all of them. And that's a decision that was made. So you should document that. We decided not to keep all the pictures of the potsherd because it was a very boring potsherd. So we decided just to keep one of them. And this is why we decided to keep one of them. We used a really, really, high definition camera, and each photograph of the potsherd is, a terabyte or, something ridiculous like that. You just simply don't have the resources in order to store that much data. So sharing and reuse. So most Canadian research agencies now require data to be shared. And there are a lot of good advantages to this. It does increase the visibility and the impact of your research. And it needs to be balanced, of course, with desires for research to maximize research outputs. So, get all the credit for doing the research before you start sharing the data with everybody. Of course, there are privacy and security considerations with data, of course, with research data. The sensitive research presentation at the beginning of this of today really helped stress that. And so you do also need to handle sensitive data differently. What data will you be sharing in what form, and why? Again, the guidance notes here are very helpful. The types of, it really goes through, and I like these guidance notes, but they talk about what is raw data, what is processed, what is analyzed, what is final. Which of these types of formats do you need? Do you need to keep one copy of the raw data? Yes. And don't do your analysis on that one copy. Make sure there's a copy of raw data that you never touch, in case some of your analysis goes pear-shaped again. Do you need to keep all the processed data, or is some of it not useful once it's been processed? Can you kind of, get rid of the rest of it? Let's say you've, dumped a bunch of flour into a bowl in order to make a cake, and some of the flour scattered on the countertop. Do you need to keep the scattered flour, or do you just need the flour that was useful in the creation of the cake? If your countertops are anything like mine, you don't want to touch that flour that went over the side. So those are some decisions that you want to talk about here. End user licenses. How open do you want this data to be? How do you want to allow people to use that data and share that data? What sort of end user licenses will you have? There's a lot of really good resources here about different types of data licenses that you can look to. And what steps will be taken to ensure the research community knows your data exists? One of the best ways of doing that is when you deposit your data is choosing one where you get a persistent identifier, such as a digital object identifier, DOI, for your data set, because that means that it will be more discoverable. There's and Meghan, did they talk about FAIR principles in the RDM workshop earlier? Yeah, so there's a set of sort of international principles for research data. You want research data to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible. All of these things come together to make all of us do better science, because we can build upon the work of others. We can reproduce findings to ensure that science become robust. And by science, I mean that in the broadest sort of sense. And so you want to make sure that you work with a data repository to ensure that your data can be can be findable by others interested in that work. Going through, we're nearly done. Responsibilities and resources. Who's doing what with your data? And this is probably the questions within this section. Who has responsibility for managing the data activities? Who will be responsible for managing the project's data during after the project? Those two, especially the first two questions, are really going to be part of your larger research project management plan for the whole thing, is knowing who's going to be doing what, who's responsible for everything. How will you manage change? And this is, there are some other really excellent resources out there for just general humanities research project management, and ensuring that everybody knows who's responsible for these research data management tasks, and that person knowing that they're responsible for ensuring that everybody in the project adheres to them, that everybody looks at the README file and actually follows the guidance on the README file, and somebody who understands what the data management plan is for this. And so you get some really great guidance here in thinking through, what is this person, what are they going to do? It could be you if it's a little project, if you're a grad student and you're doing, you're writing up your PhD thesis, it's just you. But thinking through, and my goodness, how amazing would this have been to have when I was a PhD student, my gosh. Finally, and this is a big one actually, what resources will you require to implement your data management plan, and what do you estimate the overall cost for data management to be? This can be a big one actually, and something that a lot of people might not think through. So preparing data for deposit, storing data, there are a lot of your institutional repositories that may be free, but you may need to prepare things in a certain way. Do you need to hire a library student who knows how to help you prepare your data? If you want to store your data forever somewhere, if there's a cost involved, perhaps you need to include that into your grant application at the beginning. There could be costs associated with preparing data for deposit. These are something you need to think through. Technical aspects of data management, the training requirements, file storage and backup, where are things going to be stored? Is the storage free forever? Hey, that would be awesome, but probably not. So, and this also goes back to the beginning. How much data am I actually going to produce over the course of this project? Think hard about that one as well, because if the amount of data you actually produce ends up being 12 times what you thought it was going to be, there could be a cost associated with that. So you want to think that through. And finally, ethics and legal compliance. These are really things that are going to come down institutionally. Do you need ethics clearance? What is your ethics like? There's a lot of overlap between data management and ethics. If you include sensitive data, ensure that it's managed and accessible only to approved project members. That kind of ties in with what we were talking about earlier with roles and responsibilities, who's in charge of ensuring that you're following your ethics plan, that you're in compliance with legal and funder obligations in terms of the type of data you're doing. And there are other, what strategies will you undertake to address secondary use of sensitive data? That's something you want to work with your institutions about. Legal, ethical, intellectual property issues. Most institutions have people who look after these things because they're a really big deal. And talking to research ethics boards and intellectual property experts probably at your library is a good way to really understand these aspects of your data management plan, and they're extremely important, especially if you are dealing with sensitive data. And those are all the questions. We will stop now, and we've got some more time for some questions from everybody. I don't see anything going on in the Slack channel, but But please, yeah, feel free to ask any questions and have a quick discussion. I believe we've got a few more minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. Thank you all very much. It was a pretty quick run through of a very big, very complicated, and extremely useful tool that I hope will help some of you to start thinking through your research data management plans.
Thank you. And actually, I think we end in 1 minute today, but
Oh no,
we can stay later if we
yes,
have
we
questions.
can.
But I understand it's the end of the day, so we don't want to keep people too much longer if we don't need to. But yeah, feel free to ask us questions in the chat. You can come on mic, whatever's easiest for you.
And the Slack channel will be open for the Slack channel for this session will be open throughout the course of the week as well. If something comes to you later, please feel free to pop it in there, reach out to Megan or myself, other Megan, and we'd be happy to discuss it or point you towards any other resources.
Mm-hmm.
And if no one has any questions, it's okay to leave. We won't feel bad. I'll stop recording now. If we have any questions, we won't record them.